New nanny asked the CEO's autistic daughter, "Dance with me?" What happened melted everyone. The holiday lights glinted off every surface of the Blake estate. Crystal chandeliers reflected gold against marble floors, and a 12-foot Christmas tree stood in the grand hall, draped in white ribbon and glass ornaments. Music played from a live quartet in the corner, elegant, cheerful, far too loud. Eleanor Quinn stood at the edge of the room, her blonde hair loosely tied back, her hands folded in front of her dark uniform dress. It was her first day as the new nanny. She had been briefed only hours earlier. Observe, be discreet, do not get involved in anything during the party. The instructions were clear, but her eyes kept drifting toward the corner window. There, barely visible in the chaos of sequins, laughter, and champagne glasses, sat a small girl in a pink tulle dress. Her legs were folded beneath her, her back to the wall, hands turning a plastic snow globe in slow, measured circles. Nobody looked her way. Not the servers, not the guests, not even the house staff who bustled past her. Mira Blake, 6 years old, nonverbal autism, daughter of the host, Rowan Blake, the CEO of Hartwell and Blake Interiors. Eleanor took a breath, stepping away from the bar where she had been instructed to stand by, just in case. She moved carefully through the room, weaving between conversations about market shares and new product launches, her attention fixed on the child by the window. When she reached Mira, she crouched down slowly. "Hi there," she said softly, careful not to startle. Mira did not respond. Her eyes were fixed on the swirling glitter in the snow globe. "I'm Eleanor," she continued. "I just started today. May I sit with you?" Still nothing, but the little girl didn't move away either. Eleanor sat beside her on the floor, mirroring her posture, letting silence settle around them. The music swelled in the background, violins chasing flutes in a dizzying medley. Mira flinched. Eleanor noticed. "Too loud?" she asked gently, then shook her head, remembering Mira might not answer. Instead, she watched the girl's hands, delicate fingers moving in rhythm with the globe's turn. As the song transitioned into a waltz, Eleanor shifted slightly. She extended her hand. "Dance with me?" Mira didn't speak. Her eyes flicked up, briefly catching Eleanor's before darting away. Her fingers stopped moving. For a moment, it seemed nothing would happen. Then Mira placed her tiny hand into Eleanor's. Eleanor rose slowly, guiding Mira to her feet. The girl wobbled, unsure, but did not pull away. With the snow globe now cradled under one arm, she let Eleanor lead her into a gentle sway, back and forth. No steps, just motion. They moved near the edge of the gathering, unnoticed at first. Eleanor kept her steps light, her face soft with encouragement. Mira didn't smile, but she followed the motion. 1, 2. 1, 2. Someone glanced over. Then another. The quartet continued playing, but the conversation began to fade, replaced by a subtle hush. Guests turned to look. Even the waitstaff paused mid-service. At the top of the marble staircase, Rowan Blake stood still. A tumbler of whiskey dangled loosely from his fingers. His tailored suit caught the light, but his expression was unreadable, frozen, breathless. His gaze was locked on the pair below. His daughter, dancing. It had been 3 years since he'd seen her respond to anyone outside of therapy, since she had taken a stranger's hand, since she had looked almost content. He gripped the glass tighter, swallowing the lump in his throat. Around him, murmurs rippled. "Is that his daughter?" I didn't think she could, but Eleanor didn't notice. She was too focused on Mira, matching her movements, watching her eyes for discomfort, adjusting with care. Mira began to turn slightly, mimicking a twirl, clutching the snow globe to her chest. Eleanor matched her again. 1 soft spin, 2. Then Mira stopped, pressing close to Eleanor's side, her hand still holding on. Eleanor knelt once more, smoothing a strand of hair behind Mira's ear. "You did so good," she whispered. Rowan exhaled. For a brief second, something shifted in him, not as a CEO, not as the man everyone admired or feared, but as a father. He had no words, just awe, and maybe, for the first time in a long while, hope. Eleanor sat at the edge of the kitchen island the next morning, her hands wrapped around a warm mug of tea, waiting for the inevitable conversation that would end her very short employment. She had broken a clear rule. She had approached Mira Blake, touched her, encouraged her to dance. The housekeeper had warned her before the party, do not try to connect, do not step over boundaries, do not interfere. But instead of a dismissal, it was Rowan Blake himself who entered the kitchen. He looked the same as the night before, immaculate suit, emotion hidden under sharp lines and silence. But there was something different in his eyes. Curiosity, maybe. A question unsaid. "Miss Quinn," he began, his voice low and steady, "I want to ask you something about last night." Eleanor stood, prepared to defend herself. "I am sorry if I crossed any lines. I just thought—" "You didn't," Rowan interrupted. She froze. "I just want to understand," he continued, stepping closer, his gaze focused. "What did you do to make her respond?" Eleanor blinked. "I didn't do anything to make her. I just noticed her." Rowan said nothing. His expression was unreadable, but he didn't look away. "I sat beside her," Eleanor explained, more gently, matched her posture, waited. "I didn't expect anything. I offered her a hand, that's all." "She took it," Rowan said, as if he were still trying to convince himself it had happened. "She danced." "For a little while," Eleanor nodded. "She did." Rowan crossed his arms, leaning against the counter. His tone grew more distant. "We've had every specialist, behavioral therapists, occupational, speech, endless tests, programs, charts. Nothing like that ever happened before." "Maybe," Eleanor said carefully. "They were trying to fix the wrong thing." Rowan looked at her sharply. "Excuse me?" "I just mean," she continued, not backing down. "Maybe Mira isn't broken. Maybe the world around her is just too loud, too fast, too bright. Maybe she doesn't need to be changed. Maybe she needs the world to meet her where she is." He said nothing, but his jaw flexed slightly. "I know how that sounds," she added. "But what if, instead of trying to pull her into our world, we adjust ours to fit hers?" Rowan straightened. "That's not what I was taught." "No," Eleanor agreed, "because most parenting books and CEO handbooks are written for typical systems. Not this one." He let out a slow breath and looked down at the marble floor, silent. Later that day, Mira wandered into the den while Eleanor was folding laundry. The little girl didn't speak, but her eyes followed Eleanor's hands as she made shadow shapes on the wall with the sun streaming through the windows. A butterfly. A bunny. Mira sat down beside her. Then, she smiled. That evening, when Rowan returned from a meeting, he found Mira sitting on the floor next to Eleanor, their fingers tangled in a quiet game of copycat. Eleanor moved her hand. Mira mirrored it. Eleanor clapped softly. Mira followed. Rowan watched from the doorway without a word. That night, Mira fell asleep faster than usual. She didn't need the weighted blanket, didn't pace the floor. The next morning, Rowan found Eleanor in the foyer. "I want to offer you the position long-term," he said. Eleanor hesitated. Her contract was temporary. She had another family waiting in Connecticut for January. "I appreciate it," she said, "but A hand slipped into hers. Small, warm, Mira. She looked up at Eleanor with wide eyes, then opened her mouth. Her voice was barely a whisper, almost air. "Stay." Rowan's breath caught. Eleanor looked down at the tiny hand in hers, and nodded. Eleanor never treated Mira like a project. She didn't bring worksheets or flashcards arranged in tidy rows. She didn't ask Mira to perform or repeat words for approval. Instead, she moved through the world beside her, with patience, quietness, and respect. She noticed what Mira noticed: the flicker of light on a glass of water, the hush that came when wind passed through the trees, the subtle way Mira began to sway when a song had the right rhythm. Slow, steady, safe. Their days became small rituals. In the mornings, soft music played while they matched cards, showing emotions, colors, and places. Eleanor held one up, and Mira touched it if it fit her mood. Some days, she tapped quiet or blue. Other days, she didn't tap at all. That was fine. Evenings brought sunlight spilling across the floor. Mira moved her shoulders to the rhythm of Eleanor's hums. It wasn't quite dancing, but it was connection. Rowan often stood in the hallway, watching. He was still learning, still afraid of doing something wrong. Then came the grocery store. It was a Saturday afternoon. Rowan had offered to join. To help, he'd said. Eleanor smiled, touched by the effort. Mira didn't protest, which was progress. The store was busier than expected. Holiday music blared overhead, blending with beeps of scanners and metallic crashes of carts. At first, Mira stayed close to Eleanor, gripping her hand with both of hers. Her pink dress peeked from under her coat, the same one she insisted on wearing despite the cold. Eleanor had tied a lavender ribbon into her ponytail that morning, and it trembled with every movement. In aisle 4, a flashing holiday display lit up. Then the overhead speakers erupted at full volume, rocking around the Christmas tree. Mira froze. Her eyes widened, then she gasped, a small, broken sound, before covering her ears. Her knees gave out, and a piercing cry tore through the air. People turned. A woman nearby muttered, "Oh dear." Rowan reacted instantly, voice sharp. "Mira, stop, it's okay, stop crying." Eleanor caught his arm, steady but firm. "Don't," she whispered. He stared at her. "She's never done this before." "She has," Eleanor said softly, "just not in front of you." Mira was curled on the tile, rocking back and forth, lost in panic. Sound, light, and motion collided until her world collapsed inward. "Do something," Rowan hissed. "I am." Eleanor knelt beside Mira. She didn't touch her yet. She just sat near, letting Mira see her hands. No sudden movements. Then, slowly, she began to hum, the same low melody they used every evening by the window. "Sit," Eleanor said quietly, next to her, not over her. Rowan hesitated, then crouched. "She's not misbehaving," Eleanor murmured. "Her brain is overwhelmed. We need to help her body feel safe." "What do I do?" "Lower your voice, match her breathing, touch her back, gently, here, steady pressure." Rowan followed her lead. His hand trembled once, then steadied. At first, Mira didn't respond. Then she leaned into him. Her hand slipped from her ears. The screaming stopped. She pressed her forehead to his chest. His arms closed around her, instinctively protective. Eleanor exhaled softly, staying close. When Mira finally lifted her head, eyes still wet, she looked at Eleanor. "Home," she whispered. Eleanor nodded. "Yes, love. Let's go home." They left the cart behind and stepped into the cold. Back at the car, Rowan buckled Mira into her seat with trembling care. She clutched her snow globe against her coat and sighed, exhausted but calm. Rowan shut the door and stood outside for a long moment. The winter air bit his face, but he didn't move. Finally, he turned to Eleanor. His voice was quiet, almost breaking. "I had no idea." Eleanor met his gaze, her tone gentle but steady. "You weren't supposed to, not yet. You've been trying to make her fit into your world." He swallowed hard, looking back through the car window at his daughter. "And she's asking me." Eleanor finished for him, softly. "To learn hers." Rowan Blake was not a man who learned slowly. He had built a multi-million-dollar company from the ground up, negotiated in boardrooms with confidence and clarity. But parenting, real, connected, mindful parenting, was something entirely different. He followed Eleanor's lead now, carefully. He learned to give Mira simple visual choices, red shirt or blue shirt, instead of get dressed. He paused longer after asking a question, resisting the urge to repeat himself too soon. Eleanor had taught him that Mira often needed more time to process, and he stopped saying, "Look at me when I talk to you." Instead, He knelt to her level, used calm tone and gentle presence. It wasn't about making Mira adapt. It was about him learning how to meet her where she was. The progress was slow but undeniable. Mira reached for his hand more often. She started humming when he walked into the room, quiet, tuneless notes, but Eleanor said that was her way of marking safety. "She doesn't hum for just anyone," she'd said one morning over breakfast. "That's connection." Rowan had looked at his daughter, who was lining up crayons in perfect order. His heart had ached in the most unfamiliar, tender way. But as Mira opened up, Rowan began to notice something else: Eleanor. It wasn't just her patience or her intuition. There was a heaviness to her sometimes, a quiet that clung to her shoulders when no one was watching. He had caught her standing by the living room window once, eyes glazed, lips moving slightly like she was counting in her head. When she noticed him, she had smiled quickly and busied herself with Mira's flashcards. Rowan didn't press. Not yet. One night, Mira had fallen asleep early after a full day at the sensory playroom Eleanor had helped design in the guest wing. Rowan walked past the nursery and heard faint music drifting from the library. He followed the sound. Inside, he found Eleanor curled on the reading couch, a book unopened beside her. Her eyes were wet. Her phone lay on the armrest, softly playing a lullaby version of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. She didn't see him right away. "She sang it tonight," Eleanor whispered, sensing him eventually. Mira, barely more than a whisper, but she sang along. Rowan stepped into the room. "That's a first?" Eleanor nodded, wiping a tear with her sleeve. "Yes, a big one." There was a long silence. Then she added, almost too quietly to hear, "My little sister used to sing that. She had developmental delays too, but we didn't understand then. My parents said she'd grow out of it. They didn't listen to me." Rowan sat down beside her without speaking. "She passed when she was 7. A seizure in the middle of the night. They said it might have been prevented if she'd had more medical support. Early intervention. I'm so sorry," he said quietly. "I tried to do for her what I'm doing now for Mira," Eleanor continued, voice trembling. "But I was only a kid. I didn't know how." She paused, shaking her head. "I think that's why I do this," she admitted. "Not just as a job. I walk into these houses and see kids who are like her, but not her. And I keep hoping, maybe if I help enough of them, some part of her is still alive." Rowan's throat tightened. "You're not just helping Mira," he said, his voice low. "You're helping me too." He reached out and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. She didn't pull away. For a long moment, they sat there, two people holding more grief than they had ever spoken aloud, linked now by a child in a pink dress and a lullaby that still echoed in both their memories. Outside, snow began to fall softly against the windows. Inside, something quieter was beginning to thaw. Eleanor sat at the kitchen table, sketching on a notepad while steam curled from her untouched tea. Mira was in the next room, quietly arranging felt snowflakes on the window. It was just a week before Christmas, and the Blake estate was already draped in white lights and garlands that sparkled in the halls. But Mira hated it. She flinched at the blinking lights. She screamed when someone plugged in the automated Santa that danced and sang by the front door. And she'd hidden under the table when the cinnamon-scented diffuser kicked in that morning. Eleanor had tried to explain to the staff, but festive tradition seemed to outweigh comprehension. So now, she was writing a new tradition. When Rowan stepped into the kitchen, Eleanor looked up. "I want to do something different," she said, tapping her notepad. "For Christmas." He arched an eyebrow. "Different how?" "A low-sensory Christmas," she replied. "Lights on dimmers, no music with bells or chimes, no overpowering smells, just neutral, calm things. Small tree, fewer people, no surprises." Rowan folded his arms. "That's not Christmas. That's a Tuesday with decorations." Eleanor met his eyes, calm but firm. "It would be Mira's Christmas." He didn't answer right away. "I get that the world needs to adjust," he finally said, "but it feels like I'm stripping everything away for the sake of Making things easier. No, Eleanor said softly. You're not making things easier. You're making things possible. She turned the notepad toward him. On it was a simple drawing of a tiny tree, a paper star, and 3 figures sitting on the floor beneath it. No crowd, no chaos, she said. Just peace, safety, joy, on her terms. Later that night, Rowan noticed Mira cowering near the fireplace, her hands over her ears as the stereo played a playlist of holiday jingles. The music wasn't loud by normal standards, but to Mira it was too much. Her whole body trembled. He knelt beside her, turned off the music, and whispered, "It's okay, sweetheart. We're turning it down." The next morning, the big tree in the foyer was quietly taken down and replaced with a 2-foot pine in Mira's playroom. It smelled only faintly of pine wood. Eleanor helped Mira string handmade garlands of yarn and wooden beads. They hung soft yellow fairy lights that didn't blink. Mira hummed while she worked, calm and focused. On Christmas Eve, Rowan hesitated outside the doorway to the playroom. He wore a cashmere sweater instead of a suit. In his hand was a box wrapped in brown paper with Mira's name scrawled in careful penmanship. Inside the room, Eleanor and Mira sat cross-legged in front of the little tree. A soft instrumental version of Silent Night played. No vocals, no sharp transitions, just melody. Mira was holding the paper star they had made together earlier that week. She stood slowly on tiptoe as Eleanor steadied her from behind. With quiet focus, Mira placed the star at the top of the tree. Then, something extraordinary. She turned, looked at her father, and smiled. It was a small smile, almost a secret, but Rowan felt it like a thunderclap. He stepped in, his voice barely above a whisper. "Can I join you?" Mira nodded once and held out her hand. He took it. The 3 of them sat together on the carpet. No fanfare, no noise, only warmth. Rowan handed Mira the brown package. She opened it slowly. Inside was a soft pink scarf with her name embroidered in the corner. "Do you like it?" Rowan asked. Mira looked at Eleanor, then at her father, and whispered, "Warm." Rowan's chest tightened. He nodded. "Yes, warm." That night the Blake mansion was quieter than it had ever been during the holidays. But for the first time, it truly felt like Christmas. The kitchen smelled faintly of vanilla and flour, with sunlight spilling in across the tiled floor. Rowan sat at the long counter, sleeves rolled up, watching Mira carefully line up cookie cutters shaped like stars, trees, and moons. Eleanor stood nearby, nodding with encouragement but not interfering. On the table lay a laminated visual guide, pictures showing each step of baking. Mix, roll, cut, bake, cool. It was Eleanor's idea, and Mira had taken to it instantly. "Okay," Rowan said softly. "What's next?" Mira pointed at the 3rd picture, the star-shaped cutter. "Star," she said. Rowan smiled. "Star it is." He let her press the cutter into the dough. She wriggled slightly with delight as the shape emerged clean and neat. Rowan resisted the urge to clap or talk too loudly. Instead, he offered a quiet thumbs up. Mira returned it, grinning. It was still surprising how much had changed in such a short time. He was learning. He no longer filled silence with instructions. He waited. He offered choices. He learned Mira's rhythm, her signals, her way of saying enough without speaking. Later that evening, the fireplace crackled low in the family room. Mira's play area was dimly lit, with her favorite plush animals in a line across the carpet. Rowan sat cross-legged on the couch, a book in hand, as Eleanor watched from the armchair. They had fallen into a rhythm, too, Rowan and Eleanor. They barely spoke about it, but their glances lingered longer now, their smiles softer. There was something unspoken taking root between them, tender and steady. "Twinkle, twinkle?" Rowan asked Mira, holding up the familiar storybook. She hesitated, then gave a small nod. Eleanor reached over and dimmed the light further, the way Mira preferred. The world softened. Rowan read slowly, keeping his tone steady, calm. Mira inched closer on the carpet, hugging her pink scarf. the Christmas gift she now rarely let go of. When he turned the final page, Mira looked at him for a long moment. Then, without prompting, she climbed onto the couch. Rowan froze. Mira crawled into his lap, her legs curling beside him like she had always belonged there. She rested her head on his chest and whispered something so quietly, Rowan wasn't sure he heard it. "Daddy," no loud. He did not speak. He only wrapped his arms around her, as gently as he could. The book slid from his lap and hit the floor with a soft thud. Eleanor, sitting across from them, felt her throat tighten. Rowan leaned his cheek against Mira's golden hair, blinking rapidly. "I know, sweetheart," he whispered, barely holding his voice steady. "No loud. I hear you." Tears slipped down his cheeks. All this time, he'd tried to fix, with appointments, specialists, strategies. He'd spoken and spoken, trying to reach her, but he had not truly heard her. Not like this. Eleanor wiped her own eyes. She had seen many moments with children like Mira, but few as raw as this. Rowan, a man once consumed by control and logic, now sat in complete stillness, letting his daughter lead. It was not dramatic, not noisy, but it was everything. Later, after Mira had fallen asleep in his arms, Rowan carried her upstairs. Eleanor followed quietly, turning off lights behind them. He laid Mira in bed, pulled the covers over her, then stood for a long time at the edge of the room, just watching her breathe. When he turned to leave, Eleanor met him in the hallway. "She loves you," she said gently. "I know," he replied, voice husky. "I think she always did. I just never gave her the silence to say it." They stood there a moment longer, the soft night light casting a golden glow between them. No more words were needed. It started with something small. Mrs. Laney, a former housekeeper, stopped by the Blake residence one rainy afternoon to drop off a Christmas card. She adored Mira, and when she saw the low-sensory Christmas setup, the soft gold lights, the paper tree, Mira smiling in her pink dress, she quietly recorded a short clip on her phone. She posted it online with a caption, "The sweetest Christmas I've ever seen. This little girl didn't need noise, just love." The video went viral overnight. At first, the comments were warm, strangers moved by Mira's joy, by the quiet beauty of the room, by Eleanor humming softly in the background as Mira spun beneath a string of paper stars. Then came the backlash. What kind of CEO hosts a Christmas like this? Is Rowan Blake raising a porcelain doll? This man leads a billion-dollar company? Parenting blogs debated. Business headlines followed. Too soft to lead? Inside Rowan Blake's private life. CEO Blake's holiday sparks, questions about his leadership. The board called an emergency meeting. Rowan sat at the head of the table, tie loose, eyes tired. Around him were cautious stares. "We know your daughter has special needs," one board member began carefully, "but this is affecting investor confidence." "Your personal choices are blurring with the brand," added another. "The optics matter." "What optics?" Rowan asked, voice even. A third board member tapped a tablet. "This," he said, showing the viral clip. "It makes us look weak, sentimental, distracted." "We're offering a solution," another said. "There's a highly respected residential program. Mira would get full-time professional care, and your image would be restored." Rowan stood slowly. His voice came quiet, firm. "I built this company from a garage with 2 employees and a leaky roof. I gave up birthdays, weekends, my marriage, everything for this brand. And now you're telling me that because I gave my daughter a Christmas that didn't overwhelm her, I'm unfit to lead?" Silence. "She's not a liability," Rowan continued. "She's a child. And if this company can't accept that she needs gentle lights and quiet music to feel safe, then maybe I don't need this company." He placed a paper on the table. "My resignation, effective immediately." And he walked out. That night, Eleanor found him on the back patio, coat open, snow clinging to his shoulders. Mira was asleep upstairs, tucked beneath her weighted blanket, unaware of the storm unfolding downstairs. "You really left," Eleanor said softly. I had to." Rowan looked at her, eyes tired but clear. "She needs to know I'll choose her, not just when no one's watching, but when everyone is." "You did the right thing," she said. "I don't know what comes next," he admitted. "I've spent my life building a world based on image, and now I just want to be her dad." Eleanor stepped forward. She reached for his hand. "You already are." Snow drifted quietly around them. Inside, the lights were soft, the air still. Mira slept peacefully, surrounded by the quiet love of a home made just for her. And for the first time in a long, long while, Rowan Blake felt like he'd made something that truly mattered. New Year's Eve blanketed Boston in a soft hush. Snow fell in gentle spirals outside the window as Eleanor stood quietly in the doorway of Mira's bedroom. The little girl lay curled beneath a blanket, cheeks flushed from the day's excitement, her pink dress crumpled from play, one hand clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. Tomorrow, the nanny contract would end. Her suitcase was packed. No renewal papers, no promises. She had done what she came to do. She turned to leave, but as she reached the top of the staircase, Rowan was waiting. He stood at the bottom step in a dark sweater, holding a scarf in one hand, saying nothing, only nodding once toward the back door. Outside, the garden glowed in soft golden lights. No flickers, no bright flashes, just a steady warmth. In the center stood a small Christmas tree built from stacked books and wrapped with gentle string lights. It was something Mira and Eleanor had created together on quiet afternoons. At the top of the tree was a glass snow globe. Inside it, a tiny girl twirling in a pink tutu. Rowan walked over, lifted the snow globe carefully, and handed it to Eleanor. "Mira says this is her favorite," he murmured, "because it moves, without making noise." Eleanor smiled faintly, brushing a speck of snow from the glass. "She wanted you to have it," Rowan added softly. She opened the globe. There was no ring inside, no grand gesture. Just a small piece of folded paper tucked inside, childishly written letters scrawled across it. "Stay." Eleanor's breath caught. Rowan stepped closer. "I used to think being a father meant teaching your child to adapt to the world," he said. "But you taught me it's about reshaping the world so she can live in it safely." His voice was low, steady. "You didn't just change Mira, you changed me. And if I'm lucky enough," his gaze held hers, warm and unguarded now, "I'd like to keep building this life, not alone." Eleanor's eyes welled, her lips trembling. "Rowan, He shook his head gently. "You don't have to say anything tonight. Just know that the door is open. And in this house, if anything looks like a family, it has you in it." She stepped forward, quietly slipping her hand into his. Not a kiss, not a declaration. Just a hand held tightly in the cold, saying more than words ever could. From behind them, soft footsteps pattered across the deck. Mira. Barefoot, still in her pink dress, her curls tousled from sleep, she walked toward them. She said nothing, just extended both arms and placed one hand on Eleanor's, the other on Rowan's. The three of them stood like that, wrapped in silence. Then, without cue, Mira began to sway gently. Her small body moved with the rhythm of her own heartbeat, soft and slow. Eleanor followed. Then Rowan. Together, beneath the book tree and soft lights, in the hush of the falling snow, they danced. No music, no instructions, just the three of them, moving as one. No one said it aloud, but something had shifted. A family, once broken by grief, once separated by fear and misunderstanding, had found a rhythm. It was imperfect, it was quiet, but it was theirs. And as snow continued to fall, and the new year waited just beyond midnight, Rowan looked at Eleanor, at Mira between them, and whispered, "Thank you for staying." They didn't need anything else. Not tonight. Only the warmth of hands held under winter stars, and the promise of a home rebuilt, not through perfection, but through love that listens, and love that learns. Thank you for watching this soul-touching journey of love, growth, and quiet transformation. If this story moved you, even just a little, Don't forget to subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more heartfelt tales that celebrate the beauty of healing, connection, and the quiet courage it takes to love differently. And if this dance beneath the tree made your heart melt, go ahead and hit that hype button to show your support. We have so many more stories to share. Stories that listen, that linger, and that remind us all. Sometimes, love doesn't speak loud, but it speaks true. See you in the next one.